Hi, this is Harriet Grayson, the host and producer of Community Showcase. We are so happy to have you here in this dead of winter. It's like the Arctic has come to the southern New England. We cannot believe it. It is so cold, but hopefully today, as we are actually filming Community Culture Showcase, it's actually getting to 40. 40 almost feels like summertime. It has been that vicious. So I want to lighten up your hearts and eventually, hopefully, lighten up your pocketbooks as we talk with some local artists who have some books they want to tell you about. We are continuing this wonderful series we have going called Literary Salon, Books and Brews. And so what we're having is local artists come to the Malted Barley, which is in downtown Westerly, historic, lovely downtown Westerly. And the Malted Barley is owned by a man named Colin Bennett, and he has been an absolute sweetheart. And I've known him for several years, and he goes out of his way to help promote things in the community. So he's going to help us out again. January 17th, 7 o'clock, the Malted Barley, 42 High Street, right down in downtown Westerly, Rhode Island. Come on over and listen to some great new and local authors talk about their books, read a little bit from their books. You can get lots of wonderful craft beer. You can also have some very tasty pretzels. So come on down, support us, support local talent, and support local business. So with me today are two of the artists who are going to appear January 17th at 7 o'clock. I have with me Elizabeth Saede. That's a wonderful name. Did I say it wrong?
Saede.
Saede. Oh, okay. Now, Elizabeth and I know each other for a couple of years. And also with me again is Jim Baker, who goes by the pen name James Michael Walker. And I know because I, Harriet Grayson, go by the pen name Anastasia Goodman because I write about Russians. And what is more Russian than Anastasia? So, yes. So, Elizabeth, tell us a little about you. Tell us a little bit about your book, and tell us about what you might be reading for us on January 17th.
Well, thank you, Harriet. It's nice to be here. It is nice to have it above zero, and it's funny as I look through my own book. It's called Lobster Summer. I was thinking, gosh, couldn't we all use just a little bit of summer right now? Just a little. No, I moved to the area about 7 years ago, and I had never really spent a lot of time at the beach, at the seashore, and it kind of changed me. I had a great encounter with a gal. It turned out to be a terrific friend, but she just asked me casually one day at the YMCA if I kayaked, and I said, no, but I'd like to try it. And next thing I know, I'm floating in a colorful piece of plastic on the water, and I love it. I mean, it just triggered something in me. You know, I liked the area when I moved here, but when I got on the water, something changed. I felt like I was home. And so being able to see this beautiful area from the water, the nooks and crannies, the coves, the river, and being out on the ocean on the water was wonderful. So I casually mentioned to my husband, I think I might like to try fishing from a kayak. And his first thought is he's going to be a widower. So at that point, he started scrounging for and found a wonderful old boat. We worked on it all winter. And next thing I know, I've got this cute little boat, and we're out. I was terrible fishing. Oh my goodness. It's not even possible to be more ignorant than I was. I was holding the rod upside down. I didn't have any idea that you use different bait for different things, and really so ignorant that complete strangers would walk up to me and offer assistance. So that's when I knew I was hopeless, and my sweet husband would come home and say, hey, did you catch anything? And I said, no. So one day I came home, and there was this weird cage thing sitting on my porch, and I said, what's that? And he said, it's a lobster pot. I got you lobster pots. There's 9 more at the shop. And I said, why? He said, well, because you like lobster. I said, big stretch between liking lobster. What are you doing? He said, well, you could catch lobster, and then you'd be a successful fisherman. So that's how it happened. I ended up out on the water learning to handle this disgusting bait and draw in lobsters. And the very first time We pulled our lobster pots up. There was a lobster in one of the pots, and I whooped like a kid, scared to death to touch it. And it took a couple of tries before I'd even do that. So fast forward months and months, I got to the point where I was able to go out by myself and catch my own lobsters, and I found out how insanely crazy other lobster people are and how territorial they are. Surprise, I didn't know that until they were bullying me on the water. And I thought, oh, I've just got this dinky little boat. I'm obviously a woman out here by myself. They don't care. Oh, yeah, they really cared. But would you mind if I read the introduction to my book? Because
absolutely, please.
It got to the point where I really wanted everybody to come on the boat with me and see how much fun this was. So I wrote about it because, I have friends and family far away, and I've got this tiny little boat, so it's not like I was going to fit everybody on there. But I love this. So this is the introduction to the book. Nothing about this is ordinary. I'm skimming across the water at first light, dodging weekend warriors to strain my muscles, splatter fish guts, and possibly injure myself. So why am I smiling? I now associate all of these things with piloting a boat and harvesting lobsters. This is the best summer activity the Connecticut shoreline has to offer, and my fate aches a bit from smiling. Why did it take me so long to discover boating and fishing? Well, this is the first time I've lived near the ocean. Of course, a boat is necessary, and I didn't have one of those until recently. Fear that I might drown while fishing from a kayak prompted my mechanically gifted husband to restore a tired old boat for me. Grab a life jacket, it's time to cast off. Of course I know what I'm doing. I have months of experience. Watch your step and hold on. Is this cheaper than buying lobsters at a store? Well, no, but it sure is fun. Have I told you how I started doing all this? There was so much for me to learn, and I made so many mistakes.
That is very nice.
It's
nice.
And it's funny because the whole book is written like you're just somebody talking to me, and we're chatting, and we're getting to be friends, and I'm just telling you about this goofy hobby, and it's hard, and it's dirty, and it's a bit dangerous, and I learned an awful lot about respecting the ocean because there were lots and lots of times just one little thing went wrong, and I thought that could sink the boat, and I could end up in the water or even dead. People die all the time out there. Right. So even though I'm close to the shoreline, sure, I'm still in the ocean, and there's still waves and conditions. And
now you were able to you have a recreational license to be able to fish lobsters? Is that the way it works?
Yes, the recreational license allows me to have up to 10 pots. My husband has 10 pots. So we could have up to 20, but I found for me 10 was plenty. In fact, we seriously considered 2 years ago getting me a commercial license, and but we looked at all the details, and it wasn't that much more. But I thought, no, this is enough. It's more than enough lobster for me. I have enough to share with friends and family, and I had other things I wanted to do with my life. So 10 pots, when you're handling that much disgusting bait, 10 is plenty. Yeah.
And it's heavy. Those things are not light.
They can be heavy, and it's I'm not a young thing anymore. I'm not a kid. It's sort of a funny hobby for a middle-aged woman, but it was really good exercise, and there were times that I couldn't physically pull up the pot. Now I do have a davit, which is this arm with a pulley on it. And it allows me to have a little bit of leverage and to pull the pot up without it being against the boat, so I'm not damaging the boat. But more than once, I've had a pot that was really stuck on something, and I needed to attach it to the boat and use the power of the boat to remove it from whatever it was stuck. Sometimes it's sand or mud, or sometimes it's in the rocks.
Okay.
And there was one time it took scuba diving to get a lobster pot unstuck. They disappear down there all the time. It's like a junkyard down there.
Oh, interesting.
The ocean wins more than I do.
Yeah.
I work hard for every lobster, and it's not even close to being cheaper than just going to the store when you want
buying
lobster.
Some lobsters. Well, I think I might have mentioned to you, my grandfather was a fisherman. He had a fishing business out of Oyster Bay, which is on the Long Island Sound. And he had several boats, And my mother used to talk about how their job was to get bait. And the bait that they used was clams. So they used to go clamming in the first, like the beginning of daylight, to get the clams, and then he would then go out with the boats and pick up fish. So during the Depression, they lived like they at least were able to eat because they always had fish. So they ate fish 7 days a week. If that was what was necessary, they always had something to eat because they knew how to get it out of the water. And it was funny because years later, my grandfather died before I was even born, so I never met him. But years later, one of my mother's sisters wouldn't even open a can of tuna fish. She said, I spent 10 years eating this stuff. And it's like the equivalent, I suppose. Well, this was for business. I mean, this was a business. So he luckily was able to feed his large family, but also then to sell whatever was out. And fish used to be cheap, not anymore, but I mean, it used to be a cheap thing that people were able, to get as a good protein staple for people to have. But it is a very, very hard life to do it commercially.
I'm from a long line of fishermen too. Actually, my family's from Amagansett, East Hampton, Montauk. They've been fishermen and baymen right up until my father's generation, actually. So I know it. But it's fun though. And it does cost more or something, but you know what? Almost anything that you catch tastes better.
Oh my gosh, that very first lobster, when I cooked it and tasted, I was almost in tears. I couldn't believe that I was responsible for harvesting my own food. It was an amazing experience.
Yep.
It still is.
And it is easier than raising cattle and butchering them.
Yes.
I have to trust you on that one.
Yeah.
I have to trust you on that one. But I got good at line fishing too. So it turns out that just being on the water long enough and not surprisingly listening to experts, it worked out great. So I really like to fish now too. So.
And you're still going to lobster this summer? I'm still
going to lobster this summer. I still have that delusion that it's the most fun hobby ever. And so I'm out there when it's hot. I'm out there when it's cold. We had a very long lobster season this year. We were out on the water, gosh, I think it was April 1st, and it was still cold. I mean, I'm bundled. I have my own Grundens now. I have my own lobster, official lobster boots and, gloves. And I have real gear because I'm out there by myself.
Right.
And I need protection, and I have no enclosure. I have just a little windshield, so I need all the protection I can get. But the thrill never goes away.
Wow.
And I wish there was a way for more people to experience it around here. I know up in Maine they do tours on lobster boats. I have an 18-foot boat. It's not like I can fit more than a couple of people on there.
Right.
Me, the lobster gear, and 2 people, that's it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's all there is. But the bait, oh my goodness. So
what is the bait?
Oh, anything I can get my hands on. I have a couple of benefactors. I call them my bait benefactors, kind people who make a point of trying to save bait for me because it's fish racks and fish guts and the stuff that's not edible to people. And when I first started, I found somebody very, very kind who knew how delusional it was that I was doing this, and he didn't want to make it harder for me. No, really, what he did was he gave me racks of very small flat fish like fluke and flounder and things like that. And it turned out for a beginner this was good, or I would have run screaming away, because I was able to roll up the fish racks, which is the fish minus the fillets on both sides. So I've got the head and the body minus the meat, the muscle, and I would just roll it up and I'd be able to fit it in the bag. I started calling it my burrito bait. And but fast forward, sometimes I was getting these huge hunks of fish minus the fillets, and I've got a head that doesn't even fit in my bait bag, and then I had to get this massive knife to cut it up, and I had to start wearing full protective gear because stuff was going everywhere.
Guts were going out. Yes.
And but I started getting good at filleting fish, and then I started having some of my own racks. So I've got a refrigerator freezer on my porch, and the darn thing, that's where all my bait goes. And it's permanently stinky now, so you can tell when it's the season because it just warms up a little bit, and all of a sudden that smell that would have just gagged me years ago. Now I associate it with fun.
Yep.
So go figure.
Yeah.
I would have bet you any amount of money that the smell of fish bait and squid and other things like that would never, ever, ever appeal to me. But now my brain just says, ooh, it's time for fun.
It always reminds me of my childhood too, going out with my grandfather. He was a trout fisherman. And ironically, back then, fish like monkfish, blowfish, fish that goes for $20, $30 a pound now in the city, was our bait fish.
Right.
Wow.
That was, people didn't eat those
associate,
fish.
right,
So
exactly.
we used to sort it out at the end of the day and then, put them in the lobster pots. And
But nobody used to eat porgy anymore.
Yes.
Scup.
Yep.
And it's delicious.
Yep.
I remember my husband said, oh, when they caught, because he grew up in Noank, and they had lobster pots and crab pots and things. He said, the first time we caught scup or porgy, and it was a good sized fish, he said, oh, those are bigger than we used to use. We used to only use them for bait. And I said, well, I'm not getting rid of this. I figured out how to fillet the darn thing, which
Yeah.
isn't easy because it's skinny fish. That's what I learned on. So anything that's thicker than that, it's like, woohoo, this
Yeah.
is easy. But what was funny is the very first time I fed him that fish, he was astonished. He said, I cannot believe we threw these back or used them as
Yeah.
bait. He said, this is really good, and he was shocked. So go figure.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what fish in particular has been that kind of thing where people sort of discover it or rediscover it, and and then of course tastes change. So I mean, the clamming that my mother did as a kid as bait. Today, probably that is, a valuable kind of thing that people want to eat. Then they were going barefoot in the muck. I don't know if you know Long Island Sound,
Yeah.
the mucky part of the North Shore.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
In their toes,
Yep.
digging into the kind of sandy to go and collect this kind of stuff. And the other thing, of course, is what you're talking about. It's cold.
Yeah.
Yes, it's cold on those boats when they go
Yeah.
on the water, and you don't even have to go that far because the wind picks up, and it is actually quite cold.
Yeah,
So,
especially early in the morning. It's colder.
It is very cold.
I mean, in July, you're probably happier out there when the rest of us are suffering, but in April and May, not so much fun. Well, you've made it fun.
I've made it fun, but I brought a couple of friends out, and it's funny. I love how many people have offered to come and help me. Well, they can't actually help me. They can't touch the gear. It has to be me because some of the gear is my husband's gear, and I have to have written permission with me at all times. You can't touch somebody else's lobster gear.
Oh.
So because of that, they can come, but they can't really handle the boat, and they can't really handle the lobster pots, and they can cheer me on if they want, because they always say, oh, I'll come and help you if you give me lobster. It's like, that's nice. But
It turns out it's not really helpful.
it turns out it's not really helpful, but it's fun to have company. It's fun to share with everybody, and it's funny. I just dropped something, but what ended up happening is after I wrote the book, I had an opportunity to start writing articles for the local website thisismystic.com, which has lots of great tourist information, restaurant information, all kinds of stuff about downtown. What was fun about that is I was able to start writing about an extension of what happened after the book was published. So what was nice about that is I think the adventures have continued, and I wrote about everything from losing a fishing pole to introducing people to fishing to kayaking up and down the Mystic River, which is just a phenomenal place to kayak. What it's like to live and work in a tourist town, all those kinds of things. There's just one little thing. Would it be okay if I read just a little bit from one of those articles?
Absolutely.
Thanks for indulging me.
Tell us again what the name of the publication is.
It's called thisismystic.com.
And people can get on the internet and pick it up.
They can. It's actually got lots of great articles about different things. I've written about Mystic Seaport. I've written about some of the adventurous things that you can do around here. But mostly I'm still writing about being on the water, what it's like. There was one article I wrote that's there. It's easy to find all of them. That was a day that I went out and it was so foggy. It was supposed to get better and it just didn't. So I was on the water for 6 hours straight and fogged so badly that on the radio I kept hearing other boats getting into trouble. And I wasn't, but I was right where I knew that I was safe. But it was just a crazy adventure. Or fishing for something and getting shark time after time when I wasn't trying to. Called that one accidental shark fishing. I know, it wasn't a very good name. So this particular article I like. It's called Rough Life, A Lobster's Tale. And I talk start to finish about all these crazy things that happen down there when we're not paying attention. And let me just share, this was just a funny experience. It says, only the tail, head, and body remain. All the small appendages and tail meat are gone. The lobster's end was gruesome, being eaten by a creature as heartless and hungry as itself, a bigger lobster. Absence of food triggers a fierce struggle between trapped and hungry animals. Typically, the larger animal prevails. Tautog, blackfish, feed on lobsters and will pursue them into lobster traps, including mine. But the twisted body I'm viewing is definitely the result of lobster-on-lobster violence. No rematch for the declawed little guy, as his life is forfeited and became the aggressor's meal. With adequate time, most lobsters successfully escape the rectangle of death, my name for my pots. But not this little guy. His opponent attacked, ate, and left. If it was a female protecting eggs, the smaller lobster had no chance. So later on in this article, I just mentioned some different things about lobsters and what I've learned over the past few years. And I mentioned that maybe there's really a secret fight club in here, a lobster fight club. Because how else do you explain all this? Well, it's nature. If you never know what's going to be in that pot when you pull it up. I pulled up all kinds of crazy stuff. It's always an education. It's so often not lobster. When I'm lucky, it's lobster, but it's lots of other things. And it's just a continuous education, and it's helped me to be very respectful of the ocean and really very fierce about protecting those regulations and following them so that these creatures do continue to reproduce and they're there for the next generation and the next generation.
Do you put your boat in a slip? I mean, you don't just, or do you leave it out there in the?
I don't. I found this cute little marina, Don's Dock. It's right outside of Stonington Borough. It's a great place for a small boat because it's less expensive. But part of the reason it is it's just inside a cove, and train tracks divide the cove from the main harbor. So I have to be very careful when I go in and out because I do have a windshield, and sometimes the clearance is so low that it's very hard to get in and out. But that's okay. We figured out how to adjust the windshield so it folds forward so that we can get in and out in almost any conditions. Not high tide when there's just about no clearance there. When I had a kayak, it was easier because even if there was just a little spot, I've actually been known to limbo underneath really tight quarters, but you really can't make that happen with an 18-foot boat. So.
No, okay.
But it's wonderful. That transformed things for me. Once we had a place where the boat was, I can just go and check everything and just go out. Actually, they laugh there. They say, you refuel more than anybody and use your boat more than anybody else here, and that's out of 300 boats.
Right.
So I know I was out a lot because once the bait is in the pot, it really should only be there for a day or two. So that's a commitment to go back.
Right.
And the lobsters don't care if it's raining or there's bad conditions or you don't feel well or you've got other plans. And that was a commitment, and I didn't know it at the time. I give my husband credit for this one. I didn't know it at the time, but he kind of tricked me a little bit. He said, yeah, I wanted you to use the boat a lot. So I made sure you had a hobby that you had to follow through on to check all these things. It's not like fishing. You know, fishing you go, you don't go. Lobsters, you really have to check the traps. You have to rebait. You have to make sure everything's okay.
And you have to bring it up. You have to bring each one up to see what's happened, right? So if you have 10 out there, every day? Every other day. On average. Yeah. You go back to check it up to put more food in there if it's been eaten and there's nothing in there.
Yes. Yes, sometimes what's left is pretty disgusting, but it's not even just that. The weather has a tendency, the wind and the waves and the conditions and other boats have a tendency to make it so. This past year, I lost 5 of the 10 pots that I had out there.
Wow.
Because we had a storm that just, I am always in a rocky area because that's a habitat of the lobster. But what happened was I was near a breakwater and the waves came in and they were so big. And these are wire pots. They don't have a lot of anything to push against. But these waves were so big, they were lifting up the pots and throwing them on the breakwater, which is where I found some of them destroyed. We found one intact. But when the winds and the waves are fighting me, it's not safe to go out and check them. So I became a weather expert during lobster season. You have to.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Do you
your-
have a tag on yours that say this is mine?
Yes, there's actually there's a number that's specific. We get new tags every year.
Oh,
But
okay.
we've also got some metal plates on there that identify that. Not only that, but the buoys. The buoys are a specific color that are distinctive in ours, so that you can tell what is yours and what isn't, because you cannot touch somebody else's lobster pot. But there's all kinds of crazy stuff there. I've found that once the buoy, which is only styrofoam, is banging against the rocks a whole bunch, it's white again, and you can't really tell it's yours. So you have to check and see if it's in the same place you left it. And sometimes they get dragged by other boats and people, and it's just crazy. It's again, it's kind of a crazy way to entertain myself and feed myself. But and the funny thing is, my husband had so much lobster growing up, like your family. He can't stand it. He won't eat lobster. So sometimes I come home with 5 lobsters and I just look at him and he says,
Not for me.
not going to happen. Even doused in butter. He said, no lobster. Go find a friend.
Do you fish where the commercial fishers are? Fishermen are?
I'm in a little closer than most of them, but I
Okay.
am side by side with them all the time.
Do they resent having recreational people
Yes,
there?
they do.
Oh, okay.
They absolutely do. I have found they have bigger boats than I do. But what happens is they'll go in and they'll get their gear, and I'm just going to say they're less careful than I am, because sometimes my gear gets on their gear and they kind of drag it out. And what happens is the rope is only so long between the floating buoy and the lobster pot on the ocean floor. And there's a little bit of give in the rope because you want it to, be
Move
able
around.
to, as the tide raises and lowers. But what happens is, if I put my 20-foot long rope in 15 feet of water, and somebody in a careless boat, and it could be fishermen, but I think it's often other lobstermen, if they don't notice that they're dragging my pot into 20 feet of water, the buoy goes under the water and I just don't see it again. Stuff just disappears out there. And it's everything. It's the conditions. The conditions are pretty brutal sometimes. If I don't know that there's a storm coming in, I don't know enough to pull my gear away from the obvious obstacles. I went boating with someone who was brand new boating. She was terrified. She said, "Why are you near these rocks and these scary things?" And I said, "Because that's where the lobsters are." She said, "But why don't you pull them out further?" I said, "Well, I've tried that, but
you don't want to go there.
They don't hang out there. They don't live there.
Right.
It's the wrong neighborhood, So if the idea is just to go get fresh air and sunshine, I could absolutely do that. And once in a while, I'd find a really, really, really dumb lobster. It would show up. But for the most part, if my goal is to get lobster, it has to be in all those scary spots. And I had scuba diving friends, 2 of them, go and get 2 of my pots once, and the pot had landed vertically in between 2 rocks, and it was so well hidden it took them half an hour to find it.
Wow.
And a few minutes to extract it, but it was intact, and there was a lobster in it. And I thought, poor guy, you could have been in there for weeks.
Yeah.
And another time we tried to get them to go look for some lobster pots. They didn't even find one. So it's an adventure every time.
Right. How long can that thing stay, the lobster stay in that little cage? I mean, do they die if they just stay there?
Well, Maybe, but the reality is that there's a little door on the pot, and the metal fasteners on that particular door only are designed to rust and fall off, which leaves this big open spot for the lobster to get out. Most lobsters, actually there's videos that are easy to find on the internet. Lobsters go in and out of lobster pots all the time.
Oh, okay.
I swear we just get the ones that are full and tired and taking a little nap because they're nocturnal, they eat at night.
Oh.
But I can't touch my lobster pots except during daylight hours. So I'm catching the lobster pots that either were having a party and got tired and were just there and got stuck. I don't know. But they can mostly get out by themselves.
Oh, okay.
And there's a minimum size that I can catch, but because I'm not a commercial fisherman, there's a maximum size I can catch as well. Not that I've ever accidentally caught something so large I had to, check to see if it was too big for me to keep. I did catch a 2.5 pounder once.
Whoa.
Wow.
It's actually on the cover of the book.
Oh.
It's not the greatest photo, but it's the neat thing about that is my granddaughter lives a little over an hour away and her parents are busy and everything. She was on the boat that day and her mom took pictures, which is the only reason why we have this epic picture of me holding this giant lobster with my granddaughter. And she was actually pretty cool about being near this big scary thing. So
do you have to go put the rubber bands on their
I do, and I've gotten good at it.
And did you ever get little marks from them or injured?
I had a couple that really tried to remove my fingertip, and they're perfectly capable of doing that. So, but it's really fun to share that, and that particular lobster was that was a great experience to have her. And actually, as I was pulling up the pots, I had this then 5-year-old saying, "Go, Grandma, go, go, Grandma, go." So I had my own cheerleader. So that's the treasured memory I have of that whole summer. And we pulled up lobsters and she was excited, and I showed her the crabs that were in the pot, and I showed her the conch and all the little sea creatures that were in there. And then we got lobster and went home, we cooked it and ate it, and guess what? That kid loves lobster now. And she likes going lobstering with me. So it's a family thing. She's learned to like fishing and she likes lobstering, and my daughter didn't grow up with that because I didn't grow up with that.
Right.
You go crabbing? Do you ever do any crabbing?
Not successfully. There'll be something else I'd actually like to learn how to do well. I do catch crabs in my pot. Some of them are legal size, but I don't have a crab license right this minute.
So you have to put them back?
Have to put them back, which is too bad because sometimes they're
Jonah. You have to put the crabs back?
Yes, even that made me sad because one pot had several Jonah crabs, and I thought, darn. Yeah, they're species specific. I've got a fishing license and I've got a lobster license, and I have they look like license plates on my boat, one for me and one for my husband. So from a distance, you can tell that we are legal. So I think that's why I don't usually get stopped. But no, everything about it is species specific now. So I would need a separate license to go crabbing. I would need a separate license to go clamming.
Really?
And it used to be simple. It's a little bit more complicated now.
Certainly. Yeah, and I guess it's because there are less and less species out there, or there are more?
In some cases. One of the species that's really was a surprise to me is tautog, which is also called blackfish. They attack and eat lobster. And I've caught them, and there are literally miniature lobsters in their stomachs and sometimes pieces of big lobsters. So that's what they're doing. But also there's more blackfish now than there used to be. And blackfish will attack, juvenile lobsters as well. So there's been a real increase in that population, which is competing for the same space as the lobsters because they like to hang out in the same place, the same neighborhood. And the lobsters really don't have a lot of protection. You'd think those claws would be enough for anything, but they're not. There are other things in the ocean. I found that the same fish that I'm catching, that I'm using for bait, would just as soon eat anything else out there. It's a vicious cycle. Everything eats everything else. And that's why I'm no longer squeamish about cooking the lobsters or killing fish or filleting fish. It's like, it's part of the food cycle.
Right.
And I'm very practical about it now. I don't love to kill the fish or love to kill the lobster, but I'm eating them, I'm not wasting them.
Exactly.
And whatever's left over, I'm using for something else.
Right.
And it's given me so much more respect and appreciation for the people that do this commercially, because it's hard work. I'm sure it's great, but I can't imagine having to go out for 8, 10, 12 hours a day to do what I do for fun that's already hard and smelly and makes it hard for me to go to a store afterwards because they can smell me from, all the way down the aisle.
Right. So you are not allowed to sell these things?
No, not right now. And I've really looked at other species and thought seriously about maybe getting a couple of commercial licenses, which again are species specific.
Wow, you mean to have a license for every single different fish that you want?
Like a keychain with all of them on there, But it's really, you look and you say, well, all right, what am I trying to accomplish here? If my main goal is to feed my family and have fun, I'm already doing that. So I'll leave the rest to the commercial guys who are out there feeding their families in a different way. So I respect that.
It's harder and harder and harder too for the independents, the independent fishermen. It's the big companies and stuff have taken over the big fishing grounds and stuff. It was so many when I was growing up in Long Island. When I grew up, there was so many fishermen, so many. Now they're just a handful, and they're out there plugging away.
Well, even Stonington, the commercial fishing fleet, it's so tiny, and they're under so much duress because. The amount of fish they can catch it keeps dwindling. And it's becoming almost impossible to make a living fishing commercially anymore, which is really a shame because New England is all about fishing.
Exactly.
The coastline's all about fishing.
Yes.
I appreciate recreational boaters sometimes, but this area, it's all about the fishing. And to see that dwindle, to see the next generation want to do it, but just say, I literally cannot live on what I'm earning here. Some days I don't get any paycheck.
Right.
It's changing.
It is kind of crazy too. I mean, there's a big resurgence now of independent farming, small farms and stuff. They're giving all kinds of grant and money to it, but the commercial fishermen, as you say, they're just being regulated to death. They can't.
They are.
They can't make a living with expenses and the way things are. And I don't know. It's just crazy. We allow all these other countries to come into our waters and take out tons and tons and tons of fish.
The other thing that unfortunately is happening is the water temperature is warming.
Changing.
And so it isn't that so some of those fish are navigating themselves up to Maine, and Canada's having just an unbelievable amount of fishing going on in Canada. Lobster fishing. Oh my goodness.
Lobstering is phenomenal in Maine right now. But see, the thing is like the black sea bass used to be only in New Jersey and south of there. It's come up in huge numbers too. So 1-2 degrees makes all the difference in the environment.
And I'm wondering whether, because everything you're telling me is that every fish has a different license, whether every boat can then accommodate different kinds of fish? I mean, do you have
different size nets, different regulations? Everything about it is complicated and expensive, and it's still dangerous.
Yes.
It's still dangerous. I don't usually fish much deeper than 50 feet for anything because there's so much out here for me to fish. But you're talking, being miles and miles offshore.
Right.
In terrible conditions and just something going wrong. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate the Coast Guard now. So many times I've been listening to the radio and I'm just hearing of somebody in crisis, and one of those times the boater lost his life. I mean, we heard the whole thing go down. And, other times we heard of people being rescued and things, and, God bless the Coast Guard, and, they're nearby and they get trained nearby, and that's tremendous. But it doesn't make the fishing less dangerous.
Right.
It just means maybe somebody's close enough to help them, and more often than not, it's the sea tow guy or the another boater that comes to the rescue because they're closer.
Right.
Boats can only go so fast. If you're miles and miles offshore, they don't always send the helicopter. They don't always,
Right.
Sure, definitely.
So it's harder and more dangerous, but they do it because they love it.
And I suppose you see lots of families, like in other words, just grandfathers and sons and then grandchildren taking over the business and that kind. I mean, that would be the expectation.
Less and less. There's no money in it. Not unless you have a big factory ship. I mean, it's. But you're right. Wouldn't it be great to see the same attention paid to fishing, commercial fishing, that's being paid to the small local farms?
Yeah, there's such a movement across the country from farm to table.
Right.
From farm to table.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the ocean is our farm.
It is.
And
Around
that
here
should
it is.
be a little. I was surprised because I was, I got to say, I was angry about having to get a fishing license. And for years I didn't get one. I refused to get one. I just didn't go fishing. I said, this is something that's everybody's right. You shouldn't, But I finally relented. I went and got my license. But I was surprised at the regulations when I started looking at how big the fish have to be. That so many pounds, this many inches, this many. It's like, wow. But it's too bad because you don't see even when my kids were young, we used to go down to Binless on the Mississippi River.
Yep.
When the bluefish ran. And we used to take a bamboo pole, with a little piece of worm. We used to throw it out there and you could not miss. And I was surprised how many times people would walk by with their children and stuff, and these kids had never held a fishing pole, had never fished before, you know what I mean? And I used to love just ham the pole, throw it in, and they'd catch one right away, And I'm not even sure what the regulations are on them anymore. Snapper blues, I don't know.
There are fewer regulations because bluefish are like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
They'll last forever. But but you just made a great point. If you've never experienced it, and you suddenly get a chance to experience it, it changes you.
Yeah.
It flips a switch you didn't even know was there. And all of a sudden you've got this, this excitement in a child or an adult. Sometimes it's an adult.
Right.
With me, it was, my husband actually laughs at me all the time. He loves to come fishing with me because he said, you're so relentless. You're so crazy out there. You're willing to stay out for hours and hours. And he tested me. There was one time last summer we were out for 11 hours straight, and I finally said I was done. He said, "Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank goodness.
I'm ready. I'm ready to go in."
Yeah.
But not everybody gets to do that.
Yeah. And it's too bad. It used to be just such a part of childhood. I mean, everybody fished. I mean,
They could again.
on the coast here, yes.
They could and they should again. There should be more opportunities to do that. It would change. It would change lives.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what they worry about is that they're going to overfish and then there'll be nothing left for
Reproduction in the
for
future
another
of the
10
species.
years.
And I think a lot of it too, though, is it's the shoreline's not as accessible as it used to be. I mean, when we were kids, everywhere on the shore you could go.
Sure.
Now it's bought up. Amtrak's got got their tracks, and you
Right.
can't go anywhere, can't cross those tracks and go to the water. And boats are an expense. A lot of people can't afford boats or don't have the time or whatever to have a boat.
Right.
Like I said, it's just not like when we were kids. We used to just take your pole and, dig a couple worms, walk down to the water, throw them in.
We also don't see people in their yards working on boats anymore. That used to be commonplace.
Yeah, right.
We got a great old boat,
Yep.
super cheap because it needed work, but the basics were there. But we worked all winter indoors in our shop, fixing up this thing. Thank goodness we had a place to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
But so every winter is about maintaining that boat.
Right.
It doesn't have to be super expensive. We've got
No.
Barna Island, which is a phenomenal boat launch.
Yes.
Phenomenal boat launch, and it's free, and there's a huge parking lot. It's right there. It's tremendous. That's in the Pawcatuck section of Stonington. That's the best boat launch for 20 miles in either direction. It's terrific.
Yeah.
There's also one, and I don't know how to gauge it in terms of good or not, but there's certainly one in Westerly, right by, actually across from McQuaid's supermarket. There's a boat launch.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is there a boat launch there?
There's a boat launch there. I mean, I'm not, unlike my mother who's really into this stuff, I have never been. So, but I have gone kayaking just, I think, twice in my life, maybe 3 times, and that's where we launched off of.
Oh, all right.
Those are better for smaller boats. The one at Barn Island is
nice.
huge. You can launch almost anything there. It's amazing. It's an amazing resource that's free to everybody.
Right.
Highly recommend it. But I love all the little boat launches for kayaks. I know 50 cool places around here to launch a boat.
Yeah.
As long as it's a kayak.
Right.
Once it gets bigger than that,
Yeah.
Well, you don't need a license to have a kayak.
no.
No. They haven't gone completely nuts.
No, but you can actually get stopped and have your boat inspected, even if it's a kayak. It depends.
Yeah.
I've had my kayak inspected for safety gear and make sure I had a PFD and make sure I had a whistle, make sure I had a bottle of water, make sure my name was on the kayak so if it gets lost, they know who to call. That's important. That's an important safety feature, though, because if you tip the kayak or something happens out there, they have to assume that you fell out of the kayak. They never assume that the kayak floated away from some place it was tied up.
Right.
So there are
okay.
reasons for all those things. On the surface, it seems that they're just annoying everybody that owns one, but really there are reasons for all of that. And anybody looking to sit in anything that floats or on anything that floats, there are regulations and safety guidelines for everyone's safety. I really do recommend it.
This is all done by the Coast Guard? Is that?
The Coast Guard, the DEP, there are classes you can take. There's tons of information online. It's a lot of fun, but really, I've been out in water and had the wind pick up when it wasn't supposed to, and it's terrifying in a kayak. And I've got kind of a wide, I call it my wide ride. It's a very safe kayak, but conditions can change.
Right.
You really have to be aware of all those things because conditions can change.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we do know Mother Nature's awfully dangerous. So on the water.
Sometimes she's a sweetheart, and sometimes she's out to kill you.
Literally kill you.
Literally kill you.
Yes. So I know that Elizabeth is going to leave us.
I am.
She's off
sadly
to go off and run off to do other things, but we expect all your fans will be there to find out about a lobster lady, and you'll be selling your book January 17th, 7 p.m. at the Malted Barley. So there's the book. She's got wonderful stories to tell, and this is actually, your story is really quite unusual. You don't see a lot of women who are doing the kind of stuff that you're doing, so it is a wonderful challenge. And it means that other people might want to give it a try by being inspired by your stuff.
We should always try new things.
That's
you never know
wonderful.
when the next thing you try becomes your favorite thing.
Right.
Exactly. So I wanted to thank Elizabeth. So everybody come on back on January 17th and you'll see Elizabeth. So thank you very much. So Jim, tell us your story, because you have some very interesting books that you're going to read from on January 17th. So tell us a little bit about who is the main focus of your novels.
Well, my first book was A Case of the Flying Corpse, and the main character is William Gillette. He was a prominent actor in the early 1900s who built Gillette's Castle down in East Haddam.
Right.
Which is a state park now, national landmark. He was most famous for bringing Sherlock Holmes to America.
Right.
And so I just sort of took that idea, and not only does he portray him on the stage, but I just took it a little bit further. What if he actually used his talents in real life? And so that my first book was basically introducing him to the public, and describing a little bit of Gillette's Castle and da-da-da-da. So in my second book, which just came out a few weeks ago, Accounts of William Gillette, I did a sort of an anthology. There you go.
Yes.
5 smaller stories, 5 smaller, shorter stories.
Like little vignettes?
Yeah, with, in different settings, because I wanted to bring out more of the characters, deepen it up. His accomplice in most of these crimes and solves is a man named Charles Frohman, who was also a real person and was also really his producer and a close friend of his.
Okay.
And so he sort of uses the role of Watson. He's the one who records it. I'm really happy. I like the second book. It was different for me. Instead of making one long story and tying it all together, they're shorter stories, but still having to do the same sort of thing, but quicker, faster. And it was fun. It was one set on Broadway in New York, one set in a restaurant. As a chef, I had to throw one in.
You are, right, absolutely. You are a chef. That's right.
One set on his houseboat off the coast of Long Island, and another set on a train. And another set in a theater in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'll give away a little bit of that because there's really a backstory to that. In the early 1900s, there was a play going on about the Three Musketeers in Phoenix, Arizona. And an actor named Paul Gilmore was the lead role of D'Artagnan. Well, the prop people made a mistake and loaded the guns with real bullets. And it was just one of those crazy things. And I guess they sent somebody out to get blank bullets.
Right.
He went to a shop. The guy gave him the wrong bullets, gave him live bullets. They brought him back to load him into guns. And he was shot 7 times. He didn't die, but he didn't die, but he was shot 7 times. They never thought he'd return to the theater and stuff. And I read that, and it was just sort of an offshoot because he was a character in one of the earlier stories. And I looked it up and I said, oh my God. And that was a whole other story, which is so much of what I love doing about this is, maybe the actual crimes aren't real, but the places are real. I try to make the people as real as possible, the settings. I'd like to give people the feel of that era and time. And the interesting thing is, boy, when you go back, there's a lot of interesting stories like that.
Sure,
I mean, it's,
sure.
And, so just taking them and twisting them, like I like to call it, writing the mystery into history. So,
All right, yes.
So, and I'm very excited about the Literary Salon. It was,
great, yes.
We had a nice time last time. It was a good time.
Yes, we had a decent showing.
Yep, we had a decent showing. I hope to see a lot more people out
Absolutely.
this time.
January 17th at the Malted Barley.
I couldn't tell you. I don't think that there's a better thing to do on a winter's night, on a Wednesday night. Like I said, there's a lot of good authors and a lot of good books. Like you say, great beer, great pretzels, great sandwiches.
Yes, yes.
I really kind of hope people will make it out.
Because what we would like to do is, and we've talked about this, and Colin Bennett and I have talked about it, is to make it a regular thing.
Right.
Because we do have, still have thousands of people who live here year round.
Yep.
And we have wonderful local writers. Both you and I are members of CAPA, which is the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association. And I'm also a member of the Rhode Island type organization. So we have plenty of great, just as we have wonderful visual artists, the sea and some of the historical stuff that's here makes for lots of fun writing.
Right.
Inspires writers to get out there. And I have, I don't actually write historical books the same way that you do, but I take real people. In my case, I'm talking about Russians, in some cases Russian Americans. So that in my first book, Loose Ends, one of the minor characters is actually Russian President Putin. So I read about him, I know about him, and I've kind of woven him into the book. My second book, I have a real character who was a very famous Russian dissident. I put him into the book. I am, as you just finishing up, you're actually working on your third book.
Yes, I'm working on my third book now. Yep.
And I'm working on my third book, and it's going to be more like a terrorist kind of thing. Picking up, again, from I start from history, so my book starts, the new book, 2004. It's in New York. It takes place opening in New York City because that's when President Bush was renominated as a Republican nominee for president.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So there's a lot of unrest. There's a war going on in Iraq. There's a lot of dissidents, modern dissidents who are against that war, and so it kind of flavors over. And so my character is a police detective, so he's sort of torn between having a history of protesters in his family.
Right.
And being a policeman, and then having to obey the law and make sure people obey the law. So it's that kind of twist. But I love the fact that we can, as a novelist, you can create characters, but also you can then use real people, and sort of make them characters.
Right.
And that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun.
And Gillette's Castle is a beautiful state park. It's really an unusual structure for New England.
Right, right.
So I'd like to, bring a little bit more awareness to that to people.
And you do actually sell your book in the gift shop.
Yes, I do. I have my book up there in the gift shop. I hope to be spending a lot more time up there this year. And I promote it more. Unfortunately, the state budget cuts have hit the state parks very, very hard. They do a phenomenal job, shorthanded and low money, but they do a fantastic job keeping the place going.
Right.
But they've had to cut back the tours to Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays now. It'd be nice to see it get back up to 7 days a week. There's a lot of people that come and
would like to see it.
And they come from all over.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Well, William Gillette is a household name in terms of people who know theater.
Right.
So people from Europe come, and we have a lot of visitors that come to Connecticut and the Rhode Island shore. So definitely, absolutely.
And it just puts it back in people's minds. I mean, until I started writing this book, I had been to Gillette's Castle since I was a little kid. And it sort of brings it back. And then when people see my book, they think, "Oh my God!
You forgot all about him."
I haven't been there in a long time, and I would say, "Well, you should go up and really see it, support it."
So we're going to have you read, and we're going to have Elizabeth's going to read, and we have one other author who's going to read. She writes books of a young adult. It's about horses, so that's always kind of a fun thing. So I want everybody to come out July 17th, 7 o'clock in the evening. Downtown Westerly, Rhode Island, 42 High Street.
Yep.
You park on the street. There's actually a free town parking lot. Actually, the post office also operates a free parking lot. All of that downtown. And you can have, the Malted Barley is famous for its craft beer and pretzels.
Yep.
Pretzel sandwiches, pretzels. You can have a lot of fun. And you support a local business, which is, of course, the Malted Barley.
Yep.
You support us as local artists. We are not in this to make $1 million.
No, we do it for the love of it too.
Exactly. For the love of writing, for the love of telling a story. So we're looking forward to having people come.
And we need that support, Harriet, because not to grump, but I mean, artists and other people have a lot of venues around here. There's a lot of studios, there's the Art Association, there's other things, But writers, maybe it's because it's a solitary kind of thing by nature. There's no place for us to gather, I'd like to see that,
blossom.
Move on. I'd like to see it blossom.
We want to have a regular thing. Literary Salon, Books and Brews.
Right.
So be there, January 17th, 7 o'clock, the Malted Barley, downtown Westerly, which is a lovely little place, 42 High Street. Come on down here. It's absolutely free. We would like you to drink beer and eat pretzels. And we'd also like you to buy books, but that's only secondary. So come on and have a wonderful evening. So I hope to see you there. This is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer for Community Culture Showcase. Stay out of the cold.